We're going to unlock the mystery of how all diets work. So the way that we lose body fat or weight, depending on how well you do it. Notice the difference there. When we lose weight, there's also a chance that we could lose muscle mass. When we lose fat, we're losing fat. Easy as that. So the way that these all work is that they restrict calories. And they do this in two ways. We remove either a macronutrient or we reduce the frequency, that's how you spell that, / the timing of which you're eating. So when you remove a macronutrient, let's think about a couple diets here. The ketogenic, you remove carbohydrates. The low-fat diet, you remove fat. The vegetarian diet, you remove protein, right? Each one of those, you're removing a substantial amount of your food from your plate. So if we look at those three macronutrients for a second, most people, not the elite athlete, but most everyday people wanting to perform at a high level, maybe in the business world or at home with their kids, we're trying to get 40%, 30%, 30%. Carbs, protein, and fat. What I mean by that is, if you have 2,000 calories to eat in the day, 40% of those should be from carbs, 30% from protein, and 30% from fat. So, when we remove an entire macronutrient, we could have just removed up to 40% of our daily intake. So, now we're not eating 2,000 calories a day, minus 40% of that. We're going to be eating, so I'll just minus 800. We're going to be eating 1,200 calories a day. A friendly reminder that 1,200 calories a day is the recommended daily intake for an 8-year-old. So if you're eating 1,200 calories a day and your goal, and you're not eating subsequent protein, or an adequate amount of protein, I should say, we need to refresh that. We need to take a better look at that. So, all this to say, when we reduce a macronutrient, we remove an entire macronutrient because we were told by some fitness guru that, that's the way that we should do it. We could be removing up to 40% and maybe even higher. If your intake for carbohydrates was, an incredible amount of your food, let's say it was 70% of everything that you ate in the day, and you remove that entire energy source, you're going to be eating in a caloric deficit, right? That means that you are consuming less calories than you were burning, okay? So when you consume less calories than you're burning, you're gonna lose weight. If you're eating adequate amount of protein and your caloric deficit is around 10 to 15%, that weight should not be muscle mass. Okay, so let me write that down. Actually, you write that down. Is that if you have adequate protein, we want to think 0.5 grams per pound of body weight plus adequate protein plus a 10 to 15% caloric deficit, you should lose body fat, right? So instead of removing an entire macronutrient, we take this 10 to 15% from anything, right? We could take 5% from carbs, 5% from protein, 5% from fat. It just depends. And if you have more questions, I highly recommend reaching out to a coach who doesn't specialize in any diet, but does the right thing for you. So that's talking about macronutrients. Now let's talk a little bit about reducing meal frequency. So if I just erase my couple notes here, take a second to write this down, pause the video. I have to hold my whiteboard or else it falls over. So let's say within a 12-hour day, You might eat at 7 a.m., 12, maybe a snack at 3, dinner at 6, maybe another snack around 9. That might be a little late. Maybe 8:30. I don't know why that made such a big difference. So if you're eating from 7 till 8:30, you're intaking energy, you're intaking calories for that entire time. So that's 13 and a half hours that you have the opportunity to put calories into you. Okay, so I don't know why I wrote 12 and then I continued to make an example of 13 and a half. So 13 and a half hours. If we subtract, now let's say, okay, we're only gonna eat for 8 hours. Now our window becomes somewhere between 12, I should have written 8, that would have been smart. 12 to 8. Okay, let's pretend this is now 8 o'clock. Okay, so now we basically just skip breakfast, right? So if my breakfast was 400 calories, I'm no longer getting 400 calories. That's how this works, right? That's how intermittent fasting works. You straight up remove a meal. You're gonna be eating less calories. If you straight up remove a macronutrient, you're gonna be eating less calories. This all comes down to caloric deficit. Okay? There are wrong ways to do a caloric deficit. Hear me on that point. I'm going to say that one more time. There are wrong ways to do a caloric deficit. Anything greater than a 15% caloric deficit, that's too much. Okay, that's not sustainable. Anything that has Doritos as the foundation of your caloric deficit is ridiculous, right? You need to be eating healthy food. Okay, when I say healthy food, 1 ingredient foods. That easy. Okay, that easy. Stay to the outside of your supermarket. Don't overthink it. If it has more than 1 ingredient in it, rethink it, right? What are the ingredients? Can you pronounce them? Okay, so, and don't be like, oh, sugar's a healthy food, it's 1 ingredient. Don't do that shit. So, these two things work by creating a caloric deficit. If your protein intake is adequate, half of a gram per pound of body weight. Example, I'm 250 pounds. I'm not active, hypothetically. 250 pounds, I'm not an active person. If I get 125 grams of protein, I'm groovy, right? That's pretty reasonable. If I start to improve my exercise, or if I start to, talk about goals of putting on muscle mass and stuff, maybe we cruise that up a little higher, okay? Very person dependent. But the goal of this video is to give you some understanding that not all fad diets are worth it. Just because somebody's promoted ketogenic and they made it through the first 2 weeks and it was hell and it was, oh my God, but after that it was great. It's like, yeah, you're just in a caloric deficit and your body got used to being there, right? Now it's like, yes, you've lost 7 pounds, but carbohydrates retain water. You remove carbohydrates, you're going to be holding on to less water. Okay, so don't take these, don't listen to me. Use this information, okay? Use this information, form an opinion for yourself. I don't know everything, okay? But this, removing macronutrients, removing frequency time, creates a caloric deficit. You want to lose weight? Be in a caloric deficit. That's how diets work.